Today, for the 1950 Buick, we're going to be working on the power steering rack. Now, I noticed a leak the other day, so I ordered a new rack, and we're going to pop that in now. Just as a refresher, I have a Fat Man Fabrications front stub in the car, which basically means everything from the firewall forward is replaced on the stock 50 Buick with this front end. What that does is it gives me Mustang 2 geometry and basically all the Mustang 2 parts. Now, it's set up on air ride, so it's a little bit modified, but for the most part, you can go to any auto parts store and pretty much pick up any part you need for the car. So I ordered the power steering rack, and I did have a little problem sourcing it. I ordered it from a couple different places, and apparently they were out of stock, but I was able to track one down and get it shipped to me. And I called Fat Man Fabrication just to make sure of what I needed, and they said that anything between 74 and 78 for the power steering rack should work fine. Now, they did also inform me that the rod that connects the passenger side of the car needs to be replaced from the one that's on the car now to the new part. So we're going to get the car jacked up and get going on that. First, I got to charge the battery though, because of course the battery's dead. Okay, now that I have the car up on some ramps, here is the engine bay. What we're going to be doing is replacing this power steering rack right here. And to do that, we're going to have to pull these two pressure lines that are right here. Now these run up to a GM style power steering pump. So what we actually had to do was put a reducer in here to lower the pressure down, because the GM pump wants to run at much higher pressure than the Ford rack wants to use. So before we did that, the steering was really twitchy and jerky on the car. So now that we have that little adapter in there, it steers much more normal. So let's get the new power steering rack unboxed. Okay, so here is the new replacement rack for the 50 Buick. What I've been told is that the passenger end here needs to be replaced with the one that's on my car, because I guess this is made a little bit longer. But we're gonna get that one out of here and see what it looks like. Apparently this rack also came with a new universal joint. I don't believe I am going to need this, but we'll compare it to the one that's in the car and see if it's any nicer. So first step, we're gonna pull these two lines here. These ends are pretty filthy, so it's pointless. Much better. Get these out of the way. So I believe the next thing to disconnect is this little universal joint connector. So I had to put an Allen key head on my socket. So I think that's disconnected now. Now we're going to go below and disconnect the rod ends and the mounts that attach to the frame. So here's the steering rack. It's bolted to the frame in 2 spots, and you can see these bushings are shot. They're pretty much rotted away. So we're going to be replacing those with the new kit. And then down at that end over there is where it connects to the wheel hub, so we're going to be removing that. And then there's one over here as well. You can see that these clips have started to fall off anyway. So this is probably part of the reason why we have some leaking. So these boots are not really grease tight anymore. So we're just going to replace this whole system. It's probably almost 10 years old now, so it might as well. You can see where these boot ends are starting to fall off anyway. This clamp is completely missing, so we're just going to get rid of this whole rack and not even worry about it. So I got the castle nut off. To get this tie rod end off, I'm going to have to get the pressure off of the wheels, so I'm going to jack the car up. So I lowered the car a little bit because I'm having problems getting this tie rod end loose. So I'm hoping that this is just putting some pressure on that little joint there and maybe let me get it off. So what I'm going to try now is using the weight of the car to pop it off. Loose. What a pain in the ass that was. Alright, so I'm actually gonna put these nuts right back to where they were. I'm gonna use that as my rough measurement when I put the car back together. Kind of ruined that boot, so I'm gonna go see if I can get another one. But at least this will stop me from having any weird toe out or anything if I can get it close to the same orientation. We'll take some measurements and we'll get it all sorted. In the meantime, I'm going to go to the store and see if I can pick up another one of these. Bolt in there for now to keep the rack up. So as far as I can tell, there's no difference between this rod end and this rod end. So there should be no reason why I can't just use the ones that are on this now. So what I'm going to do is count the rotations, full walk left to right, and try to get this centered towards the middle. So here's starting out all the way to the left. One, two, and a half. So 2.5 rotations lock to the right. So 1, 2, and a half. So when this is 100% in between, it should be 1.25 rotations. So 1 rotation, and then 1/4. And that should be dead center in the middle. Now, I'm going to do the same thing with the old one and check and see if the lengths of the arm is exactly the same. Now what we're going to do is count how many times this spins around to come off, and that should give us decent geometry getting back on. So it's horizontal, so that's 1 full rotation, 2 full rotations, and about a half. Nope, 25 3/4, I would say. So, we put this one on. I'm going to start there. So, this is the 25 3/4. We're going to go, that's the 3/4. And now, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's where our base point is going to be. Bring this all the way up to hold that in place. And we'll probably have to get the car lined after this, but at least we'll have a decent enough starting spot. Now let's do the other side. Two and a quarter, let's say. 1 right there. 2. All right. We are going to use the new universal joint, because the old one had a D shaft and the new one has a spline fitting. And I have to take the shaft off of this one now. This just requires a 9/16. Those are loosened. Loosen the set screw that's inside of them. This one's in there pretty good. So let's see if we can't get that out of there. There's that shaft ready to go. We have the little indents in them, so we're just going to reline it back up with that and we put it into the new universal joint. Slide this back to the hind joint and it should be ready to roll. So I sourced these two fittings out of the old power steering rack, but I managed to wing the shit out of that one. Put a good dent in it, ruin the threads. So I'm gonna see if I can fix the threads now. So these AN fittings, one goes in here and one goes in here. They're different diameter. I was able to get the threads straightened out, so they should be good to go. Just got to get it snugged in there. Now that all the lines are hooked up, we're going to fill the power steering fluid. I have no idea what the capacity is on this. I'm just going to fill it up a little bit. Start the car. got a leak. So we're getting a little bit of leak from the power steering rack. It's coming from that AN fitting that I damaged taking it out. I thought it would be alright, but it's not. So we're going to take that one out and see if I can get another fitting to fit that. So here's the AN fitting that was in that rack. There's that good sized dent there, and you can see that the hole is a little out of round, and that washer got a little squished. So I'm going to try to replace this, see if we can get something that works a little bit better, and go from there. I may have a part here, I may have to run to the auto parts store for it. Here's a random bit of luck. Here's the old AN fitting, and I found this one in a box of parts that came with this car when we installed the power steering rack last time, it looks like. So we'll get this one popped in, and hopefully that one won't leak. Okay, so we're hoping we didn't mess up the geometry too much. I turned this tie rod end on exactly the same amount of turns that it was before, so hopefully everything will line up. We're gonna slide this into the steering knuckle now and put the crown nut back on top. Already reinstalled the dust cover to protect the joint. These castle nuts get torqued to 70 foot-pounds. I'm gonna jack the car up to get some clearance. Now the crown is slightly missing the holes, so you're actually going to tighten a little bit more to get it all the way around. So I have a massive toe in right now, and I think it's just because this wheel hasn't tipped properly. If it's not that, this whole tie rod end has to be adjusted out. So we're going to see what happens when I straighten out the steering wheel and lower it down. Well, that's not supposed to happen. Whew. There's one tight ass ball joint. Got this big 20-inch wrench on this sucker. Finally broke it free. Here's the old ball joint and the new one. See it snapped off in there. Looks like this is actually dented. I'm not really sure why. So the castle nut on the bottom of this ball joint is a 7/8. We were missing the pin on the castle nut. Not sure if that had anything to do with the failure. Shouldn't have. I think the part just popped out of the bead and that was it. So I've been driving this car around since 2012 now, 2013, something like that. So 8 years on the road now at this point. You know, some stuff just breaks. Especially with the amount of articulation that this front end has in it with the air ride system. It's, you know, kind of to be expected. So let's get this ball joint out and get the next one in. And there's what's left of that ball joint. So we will I'm going to look up what the specs are to torque this down. We'll get the new upper part screwed in up to the top of this, and then bring the spindle bracket up, get this dropped through, put the castle nut on it, and then put the cotter pin through, and we should be good to go. My particular car is using a Moog Chrysler, a K772 ball joint. I believe this is off a Chrysler or something or other. Here's the grease fitting for it. We'll get that screwed in and then get this ball joint put in. For whatever reason, this grease fitting does not want to get threaded on there. It looks like it might be a little chewed up in the threads. Let's see if I can take the one off the old part. Okay, so we got the fitting on there, the grease fitting. It's dropped and threaded into here. Alright, so that's screwed in there. So we're going to torque this castle nut to 53 to 81 foot-pounds, and then make sure one of the openings in the castle nut slides back around to open up that hole, and then we'll put the cotter pin in. And this will be the tricky part, getting this to line back up. Normally you'd take the tire off, but I'm being lazy. We're going to put the boot on the end of the ball joint. Alright, so they're lined up. I just got to get the castle nut on there and get this tire a little higher. And we should be able to get that tightened down. Again, this would have been way easier if I just, you know, took the tire off. Okay, so we're gonna give it a little starter juice because we haven't started her in a while. And then let's see if we'll turn over. That was a much bigger pain in the ass than I thought. We replaced the power steering rack, damaged AN fittings, so I had to replace the AN fittings. And then once I got the AN fittings on and went to go start the car, the starter died, so I had to replace the starter or get the starter repaired. We had already replaced the starter a few weeks ago, and whatever they did with the rebuild, it was a piece of garbage. So then we jacked the car up, found out that one of the ball joints was busted on the passenger side, on the upper ball joint, replaced that, and then got everything back together, got the starter back in, got the AN fittings fixed, and now here we are, car runs. So the next thing we're going to do is get it over to the alignment shop. I know my alignment's all out of whack right now because I know that the tie rod didn't go on the same amount of turns as it came off. So hopefully they can get that all squared away, and then we'll be back on the road. Tune in next time. Not so fast. We didn't get it back on the road. Once I lowered the car on the ground, I realized that the alignment was basically like this. The wheel was turned directly to the center, and the driver's side was dead straight, and the passenger side was towed in like this, and under a lot of pressure. I think that actually might have been what broke the upper ball joint when I lowered it, while I was testing it up and down. It might have actually caused the fracture. But regardless, when I contacted Fat Man about what rack I needed to use, they told me use this year, Mustang 2 rack. That was the right one to use. And they told me I needed to take the passenger side end off of the existing rack I had. They weren't really clear as to whether or not it was the extension bar that comes off of the rack or if it was the tie rod end itself. I just spoke to the tech support guy really quick on the phone, and it didn't sound like a problem. The new rack I bought didn't come with an actual tie rod end, the end that connects it to the steering knuckle. So, my thought was, well, if I don't need the bar, then I just need this end and it's already on the car. The new rack doesn't come with one, so I'm just going to reuse that same part. When I did that, that created that problem. Now I looked at the actual bar that was on there, the threaded rod that comes out of the power steering rack, and there was no difference in length. So I can't find a difference or a reason why this rack is so misaligned compared to the other one, to the original one that was in it. So what I did end up doing was ordering an extended tie rod end. Since the Mustang 2 is used in so many different applications, they make a lot of different sized tie rod ends for it, and so I was able to find an extended length one. It was about an extra inch or so. I had tried backing out the tie rod as much as I could, and I'm holding on to like a 1/4 inch of threads, and it's still not enough to bring any of that toe in on the passenger side. So I bought the extended tie rod end, and I replaced it, and now when I lowered the car down, I was able to track it normal. The thread count of spinning the tie rod on no longer matched anymore, so I got it as centered as possible. I actually took a bunch of measurements from the front of the wheel to the back of the wheel and tried to get that even with the frame as best I could. That was really the only measurement I could go off of. The driver's side was still, dead perfect, but the passenger side was just all sorts of off. So I backed it up enough to take some measurements and get as close to straight in and out as possible. And the other thing that affects it is as the car goes up and down on the air ride, everything kind of articulates and moves. So what I did was I set the air ride to the height that I like to drive at, and then that's the measurement that I took for the wheels to get it aligned. So right now it looks like it's working. I still do have to get it to the alignment shop. I haven't done that yet, but the bigger issue that I'm having is I can never start this thing. So that starter went bad, and it takes me forever to start this car. So instead of doing any other modifications on any other car, the next thing that's happening is the EFI system is getting put into this Buick. So that's going to be the next video. I'll get the alignment done once the EFI is done, and I can actually reliably drive it to the alignment shop and not have to worry about breaking down on the way. So that's next. We'll see how that goes. So I've never installed an EFI system before, but it's going to work or it's not. and if it doesn't, then I'll call in reinforcements and have somebody come help me with it. But I think I can handle it. The system that I'm getting, it seems pretty self-explanatory, so we're going to get it installed and see what happens. See you next time.